Imagine this. Rules written thousands of years ago, still quietly running your life today. Every traffic ticket, every fine, even the fair way society tells you to behave, chances are it's influenced by a system someone designed centuries before you were born. And here's the kicker. Some of these rules were shockingly harsh, others downright unfair, yet people still worship the system like it's untouchable. Makes you wonder, are we living under justice or just the long shadow of someone's obsession with control?
And here's the controversial part. The person behind it all wasn't just thinking about fairness. They were thinking about power, fear, and leaving a mark that could manipulate generations. Some call it genius, others call it tyranny. You might start questioning everything you've been told about right and wrong, about fairness, even about freedom itself. By the end of this video, you'll notice rules hiding in plain sight, patterns in life you never questioned, and maybe even start asking, who really decided what you can or cannot do? Stick around, because the truth is messier and darker than you ever imagined.
So, let's set the stage. Thousands of years ago, in a time when cities were messy clusters of mud brick houses, markets buzzing with bartering, and rulers relied more on fear than on consent, someone decided it was time to draw the line, literally, between order and chaos. Life back then was brutal. Theft could get you a hand chopped off. Debts could destroy your family, and social class basically determined whether your life mattered. Now, here's the controversial bit. Many historians argue that the so-called justice from that era was less about fairness and more about control. The rich and powerful got to decide what justice looked like, and the rules weren't there to protect the weak, they were there to keep the hierarchy intact. Makes you wonder if our modern obsession with justice for all is really any different, or just a polished version of the same game.
And let's talk about morality. Today, we like to imagine that ancient rulers were all noble, wise, or divinely inspired. But the reality? They were calculating, ambitious, and sometimes downright ruthless. Every rule carved into stone wasn't just a guideline, it was a power move. Want to borrow money? Pay a debt? Commit a minor offense? Better hope you're on the right side of the lawmaker's favor, because the consequences were extreme. Some scholars argue this was genius statecraft. Others call it tyranny, masquerading as order. And here's the kicker. The echoes of those laws still shape debates today. When we argue about justice, fairness, or punishment, we're not starting from scratch. We're arguing with ghosts who designed rules to favor themselves. The audacity of that, right?
But here's where it gets even juicier. This isn't just about old, dusty laws. It's about influence. Those ancient rules weren't buried and forgotten. They became the template for civilizations that followed. Courts, contracts, even morality itself were filtered through the lens of those first systems. Some people would argue this is brilliant, laying down a foundation that lasted millennia. Others would say it's disturbing how a single person's vision, biased by privilege and power, can echo through centuries and subtly shape the choices of millions.
And that's exactly what keeps historians, lawyers, and philosophers in heated debates. How much of what we consider justice today is genuinely fair? And how much is just a shadow of ancient ambition? Stick around, because the real story behind these rules will make you question everything you thought you knew about fairness and power.
Now let's get into the rules themselves, the ones that made people gasp, argue, and sometimes tremble. These were your polite, say sorry and move on guidelines. Some were brutal beyond belief. Steal, lose a hand. Hit someone of higher status, pay with your life. Borrow money and default, watch your family suffer. And yet, at the same time, there were rules protecting the weak, like widows and orphans, which was revolutionary for the time. Sounds like a paradox, right? Some say this shows brilliance, a system balancing fear and protection. Others argue it's manipulative. Use cruelty to maintain control. Sprinkle in mercy to gain loyalty. The real question is, do we ever truly know when laws are designed to protect us or simply to shape us?
And here's where the debate heats up. Modern critics love to call these laws primitive or inhumane. And yes, by today's standards, many of them are horrifying. But take a closer look. Even now, our society still punishes the poor harsher than the rich, enforces rules that benefit the elite, and debates morality through a lens of power. Think about it. How different are we really? Some argued this ancient system was a blueprint for civilization itself, creating order from chaos. Others call it a blueprint for oppression, where a single authority imposes their morality on everyone else. And here's the kicker. Whether you admire or despise it, these rules spark debates that continue to this day, showing that law is never just black and white. It's always messy, political, and personal.
But let's not sugarcoat it. These rules were made to be seen, to be felt, and to leave a mark. Carved into towering stone slabs, they were meant to intimidate, to broadcast authority, and to ensure that everyone, no matter who they were, knew exactly where they stood. Some people see this as genius communication. Others see it as psychological warfare. And here's the real mind-bender. The core ideas behind these ancient laws didn't disappear. They were copied, adapted, and subtly influenced legal systems for centuries, even in ways we don't consciously notice today. So, the next time you complain about bureaucracy, fines, or unfair rules, remember, you're probably walking in the footsteps of someone's centuries-old vision. And the debate rages on. Are we honoring justice, or are we still trapped in someone else's ambition?
So let's get real. Behind every rule etched in stone, there was a mind at work, calculating, ambitious, maybe even a little ruthless. This wasn't just about keeping people from stealing goats or squabbling over land. No, the bigger picture was about control, deciding who gets power, who suffers, and who gets protected. Some historians call it genius statecraft, others scream tyranny. But here's the part that really sparks debate. How much of this system was actually designed to serve the people,
and how much was a power play to make sure the ruler's influence would echo for centuries? Hint, probably more of the latter. The audacity of that kind of foresight is staggering, and honestly, it makes modern politics look like child's play.
And don't get me started on morality. Today, we love to romanticize the great minds of history, painting them as noble, wise, or divinely inspired. But scratch the surface and you find ambition dripping from every law, every decree. Some of these rules were shockingly progressive, protecting widows, orphans, and the powerless. Yet others were downright cruel, punishing minor crimes with extreme force. Was it a balancing act or manipulation dressed as justice? You decide. The real controversy is that this isn't ancient history disconnected from us. It's a mirror. Our debates about justice, punishment, and fairness today, they're just echoes of decisions made thousands of years ago.
Here's where it gets really juicy. The motivations behind these laws weren't written in a textbook. They were hidden in plain sight, in the details, in the punishments, in the protections. Every rule had a message, a lesson, and a reminder of who held the power. And the kicker? These ancient ideas didn't vanish. They morphed, were adapted, and quietly influenced legal systems, ethics, and social hierarchies for centuries. Some might call it visionary, others call it terrifying. A single mind shaping civilizations long after they were gone. By understanding the ambition behind these rules, you start to see patterns in our world that are uncomfortable. You start asking questions no one wants to answer. Who really decides what's fair? And are we ever truly free from someone else's vision of control?
Let's talk about the people living under these rules. The farmers, merchants, and everyday citizens who didn't get to carve their own laws. Life under this system wasn't just strict, it was terrifying. Minor infractions could result in extreme punishment, and social class determined whether you'd be shielded or crushed. Some historians argue that these laws were a masterstroke of order, creating a functioning society out of chaos. Others see it as a calculated form of oppression, designed to keep the majority in line while protecting the elite. And here's the real kicker. If you think modern society is fair, think again. Inequality, loopholes for the rich, harsher punishments for the poor. Sound familiar? Maybe we're still living under rules built for someone else's advantage centuries after they were first carved.
And the controversy doesn't stop there. These laws didn't just punish, they taught lessons. Steal, cheat, or disrespect the hierarchy, and the consequences were public, humiliating, and brutal. Some argue this was ingenious, fear as a tool to maintain societal stability. Others call it psychological warfare, designed to manipulate and control populations. It sparks debates even today. Are harsh punishments truly effective, or do they simply maintain the power of those who write the rules? And think about it. Every time society debates crime and punishment, prison reform, or income inequality, we're basically arguing over the same themes that existed thousands of years ago. The question remains, are we progressing or just polishing the same old methods of control? Here's the part that will make you uncomfortable. The laws also created culture,
habits, and moral frameworks that seeped into generations. People didn't just follow rules, they internalized them, believing they were right or just because society told them so. Some might call this education, others call it indoctrination. And the truth, the echoes of these decisions are everywhere, in modern courts, in governance, even in social norms that we rarely question. The debate is unavoidable. How much of our understanding of fairness is genuinely ours, and how much is inherited from a system built to serve someone else's vision? The answers aren't simple, and the implications might make you see today's justice in an entirely new and deeply controversial light.
Let's get into the mind game. Why did ordinary people follow these extreme laws without revolting? Some historians chalk it up to fear. Get caught breaking a rule, lose a limb, or worse. But fear alone doesn't explain the full picture. Humans are wired to look for structure, for patterns, and to trust authority figures, especially when society convinces them that obedience equals survival. Here's where it gets controversial. Does this mean we're naturally submissive? Or were people manipulated into compliance? And before you roll your eyes, think about today. How often do we blindly follow rules we don't question, from traffic laws to corporate policies, simply because that's how it's always been? Suddenly, the ancient system doesn't seem so far removed from modern life.
And here's the part that sparks debate. The laws weren't just enforced externally, they were internalized. People began policing themselves, believing cruelty, hierarchy, and inequality were just because that's what the rules dictated. Some argue this shows incredible foresight. The ruler engineered society not just with punishments, but with psychology. Others screamed tyranny. How much of what we accept as normal is actually a carefully constructed illusion of consent? The truth is messy. When we admire efficiency in government, order in society, or even respect for authority, we might just be praising centuries-old manipulation that's been quietly baked into human behavior. That's a thought that doesn't sit well with everyone, and it's exactly the kind of debate this history sparks.
Here's the kicker. These psychological patterns didn't die with the lawmaker. They spread, morphed, and influenced generations, shaping how people think about fairness, obedience, and morality. From courts to workplaces, from schools to social norms, echoes of this ancient mind game persist. The controversy? Some see it as genius, an understanding of human nature so deep it still works today. Others call it chilling, proof that one person's ambition can subtly steer civilizations long after they're gone. So the next time you follow a rule without questioning it, or find yourself judging others for breaking one, consider this. Are you acting freely, or just dancing to a rhythm someone else composed thousands of years ago? And that's exactly the kind of debate that refuses to die.
Now let's talk about the part nobody wants to admit. These laws weren't just about justice, they were about power. Every rule written, every punishment carved, every decree proclaimed, it all served one purpose: to solidify control. Some scholars insist the system was fair, even progressive for its time. But come on,
When the person writing the rules also benefits the most, can we really call it justice? It's the same argument you hear today. We need structure, we need order. Sure, but who gets to decide what that looks like? And here's the twist most people miss. Every modern legal system, from the US Constitution to corporate rule books, still carries that DNA. The myth that the ones in power are acting in everyone's best interest. History suggests otherwise. The power dynamics were blatant. If you were wealthy or high-ranking, the laws bent for you. If you were poor or marginalized, the laws crushed you. Some call it early equality under the law. Others say that's a laughable myth. And here's the debate. Was the system intentionally designed to protect the elite, or was inequality just an accidental side effect? Modern America still argues about this. Who does the justice system favor? Who gets harsher sentences? Who can afford better legal defense? These questions didn't start yesterday, they're ancient. The parallels are uncomfortable because they expose something we'd rather not face. Maybe fairness has always been customized for the powerful. And behind all this power was strategy, a political blueprint disguised as morality. People were told these laws came from a divine source, making them unquestionable. Was that spiritual truth or brilliant propaganda? Believing your ruler speaks for the gods gives them absolute authority. No elections, no debate, no appeal. And here's what will stir up debate. If you look closely, modern governments still use higher ideals, freedom, democracy, patriotism, to justify power and control. Different words, same strategy. Media and culture, same story. Out of the endless movies released every year, only a small handful become blockbusters that rake in 80% of the box office revenue. Out of thousands of songs uploaded to Spotify daily, maybe 20% get 80% of the streams. And most of those are from the same top artists. Even on YouTube, a tiny fraction of channels generate the majority of views and ad revenue. It feels unfair, but it's not random. It's the 80-20 rule in action. Once something gains traction, it snowballs, and suddenly that 20% holds a disproportionate influence over what we watch, listen to, and even believe. And here's the kicker. This doesn't just shape entertainment. It shapes our worldview. If the same few voices dominate the narrative, they end up deciding what truth looks like for millions of people. This isn't a new phenomenon. It's ancient. One voice becomes the megaphone, and everyone else becomes the echo. The lawmaker of our story understood this before mass media even existed. He carved his laws into stone and placed them in public spaces, broadcasting his message to all citizens, the ancient version of going viral. The more people saw it, the more they believed it, and belief becomes culture. This raises a debate modern society still fights over. Do we choose our culture, or does culture choose us? Even today, influence is monopolized. A few creators, a few networks, a few corporations shape global consciousness. The ancient blueprint survives. Visibility equals authority. So when we criticize old civilizations for being manipulated, we should probably look in the mirror. Algorithms reward the loudest, the fastest, the most sensational, not necessarily the most truthful. And that's the uncomfortable truth. Maybe we haven't evolved past stone-carved influence at all. We've just upgraded the tools. The real shock isn't that these ancient laws existed, it's that they still shape our world today. Legal systems across continents echo the structure he created: offense, punishment, hierarchy, order. Some judges, politicians, and scholars proudly trace the roots of modern justice back to these stones. Others call that claim ridiculous, saying it glorifies a system that was brutal by modern standards. But whether admired or condemned, the influence is undeniable. The debate isn't just historical, it's philosophical. Should today's society borrow ideas from a world that barely resembles ours? Think about it. Rules of trade, property rights, accountability, these weren't accidents. They set the foundation for the modern economy. But so did class division, harsh punishments, and rigid hierarchies. Some say this was necessary structure. Others argue it was systemic oppression, polished into something we now call civilization. It's a messy inheritance. We praise order, but ignore the cost. We celebrate structure, but forget the roots. And maybe that's the uncomfortable truth. Every society inherits rules it never agreed to. Whether we like it or not, we're living inside a world shaped by someone who lived thousands of years ago. His ideas shaped nations, religions, economies, and moral frameworks. And here's the controversial part. Some people argue that modern society still hasn't outgrown his shadow. From justice reform debates to arguments about fairness, responsibility, and punishment, his fingerprints are everywhere. We didn't choose this legacy, but we are still navigating it. So, after everything, the power games, the psychology, the influence, the legacy, who was the mind behind it all? Who carved a worldview so strong that it echoes into modern America, whether we notice it or not? Who was bold enough to write laws in stone and confident enough to demand an entire civilization obey them? It was Hammurabi. And here's the twist. Hammurabi didn't just create a legal system. He created a psychological framework that still shapes how we think about fairness, punishment, and authority. Some call him a visionary of justice. Others say he was the architect of fear-based order. Both sides have a point, and that's what makes this debate endless. He might be one of the most influential people in your life without you ever realizing it. Not many ancient figures can say that.
So now it's your turn. Was Hammurabi a genius who saved society from chaos, or a manipulator who engineered control through fear? Drop your take in the comments, because this is a debate that fires people up every single time. And if you want more deep dives into the hidden forces shaping your world, you know what to do. Your worldview is shifting. Might as well follow along.